Trump told Axios that Iran is choking like a stuffed pig. Those are his exact words. The blockade is more effective than the bombing. He said Iran is being squeezed harder than any country in modern history, and then in the same press cycle, Iran's Joint Military Command said something that demands attention because the specific language is doing very specific work. It said Iran's armed forces have their hands on the trigger. It said the moment the enemy makes the slightest mistake, it will be met with full force. And then it named no condition under which the trigger would not be pulled. Hold those two statements next to each other right now. America's president says Iran is choking. Iran's military command says hands are on the trigger with no condition attached. Both statements are official. Both are on the record. Both cannot simultaneously be a complete description of the same situation. A country that is genuinely choking names the condition that stops the pressure. A country that gives an unconditioned military warning is not calculating that it is choking. Oil is at $16. Germany's chancellor has said the Americans clearly do not have a convincing negotiating strategy, and that the United States is being humiliated by Iran. China has said nothing about any of it, not about the stuffed pig statement, not about the IRGC's unconditioned warning, not about Germany's humiliation verdict. 0 words from China about the most alarming combination of statements in this entire conflict. Everyone covering this is treating the choking claim and the IRGC's trigger statement as two separate stories from opposite ends of the negotiating spectrum. They are not separate. They are one signal, and the signal is not about who is right about Iran's condition. The signal is what happens when a country removes the off switch from its military warning at the exact moment its adversary calls it choking. Because in 60 days of this conflict, every Iranian military warning before this one named a condition: respond if you bomb, retaliate if you seize ships, close Hormuz if you resume strikes. Each warning told you what not to do. This warning told you nothing about what not to do. Just hands on the trigger. Here's the question that needs answering. How does a country under the most intensive American economic and military pressure in modern history issue a threat with no condition attached? What is the structural foundation of removing the off switch? One word: China. Not China as a diplomatic actor, China as the economic architecture that makes the off switch unnecessary. A country that genuinely needs the pressure to stop names its condition because it needs the other side to know what to do. A country whose oil revenue is flowing at 1.84 million barrels per day through China's dark fleet, more than before the war started, does not need the pressure to stop. It can sustain the pressure. And a country that can sustain the pressure indefinitely has no strategic reason to tell its adversary what would end the threat. The absence of the condition is Iran confirming that China's system is working. I call it the unconditioned warning. And once you understand what it means when a country under maximum pressure removes the off switch from its military threat, you will never read another IRGC statement the same way again. Start with what the 4 signals together tell you that none of them tells you alone. The first signal is the military command statement. Hands on the trigger, slightest mistake, full force. Military commands issue warnings. That is their function. The specific pattern to watch is not the warning itself, but whether the warning includes a condition. Previous IRGC warnings in this conflict included conditions. We will respond if you enter Iranian waters. We will retaliate if you seize our ships. We will close Hormuz completely if you resume bombing. Those are conditioned warnings. They tell you what not to do. They preserve a diplomatic path because they define the boundary of escalation. The current warning tells you nothing about what not to do. It just told you the trigger is loaded. The absence of the condition is the analytical signal. A country that still wants a diplomatic outcome tells you how to avoid the trigger. A country that has internally decided the diplomatic outcome is no longer the primary path stops naming conditions. The warning without a condition is the warning that has moved from threat to description. The second signal is Parliament's Hormuz declaration, not a negotiating position, an order from the leadership. The specific language matters here. Iran's deputy parliament speaker said this is an order from the leadership. In Iran's political structure, the leadership means the Supreme Leader Office and the IRGC command, the institutions that operate above the elected government, above the president, above the foreign minister, above the diplomatic faction entirely. When Parliament quotes the leadership on a specific military strategic decision, it is confirming that the decision has already been made at the highest level of Iran's non-elected power structure. This is not a negotiating position that can be softened by the foreign minister in a back channel. It is a directive from the command structure that controls Iran's military assets. The diplomatic faction cannot walk it back because the diplomatic faction did not issue it. The third signal is the forced unity statement, both the president and the parliament speaker posting identical language on the same day, erasing the moderate hardliner distinction. America's entire negotiating strategy has been built on the premise that Iran has a diplomatic faction capable of making and keeping commitments. The assumption is that the diplomatic faction can bring the IRGC to accept a deal if the terms are right. The forced unity statement removes that assumption publicly. When both the president and the parliament speaker post the same message on the same day, "We are all revolutionaries. There are no moderates here," they are telling America that the distinction it has been negotiating toward does not exist in its current form. There is no separable moderate faction with independent authority. There is one Iran. It is revolutionary, and it gave a military warning with no off switch. The fourth signal is the timeline. All four of these statements arrived together the same week that Russia announced it has nuclear proposals for Iran. The coordination of Iran's unified hardline messaging with Russia stepping publicly into the nuclear broker role is not coincidental timing. Iran knows Russia has proposals. Iran knows that Russia's proposals give Iran an exit from the nuclear question that does not require surrendering anything to America. Iran's unified hardline messaging tells you what Iran has decided to do with that knowledge. Not soften its position toward America, but harden it publicly while pursuing Russia's alternative privately. The IRGC's unconditioned warning and Russia's nuclear proposals are not contradictory. They are Iran running two tracks simultaneously, the public track that projects strength and the private track that preserves the Russia exit option. The dual tempo strategy operating at its most precise, and China has been watching both tracks run simultaneously for 60 days now. Here is the historical parallel China is running because China has seen this exact combination of signals before and knows what it has produced. The parallel is not the Cold War and it is not Vietnam. The parallel is July 1941 and the months that followed when the United States imposed a total oil embargo on Japan. Japan was dependent on American oil for roughly 80% of its military fuel. The American calculation was identical to today's. Cut off the resource. The opponent cannot sustain operations. The opponent negotiates. America wins without firing a shot. For several months after the embargo, Japan appeared to be negotiating. Tokyo sent delegations. Japan's foreign minister met his American counterpart repeatedly. Proposals were exchanged. The diplomatic signals said one thing. The inward signals said something else entirely. During the entire period Japan appeared to be negotiating, Japan was simultaneously turning its economy inward, redirecting industrial output toward domestic military production, securing alternative fuel sources in Southeast Asia, and preparing its population for self-sufficiency. And Japan issued no statement telling America what condition would end the crisis. Japan negotiated without naming an off switch. The American analysts of the time read Japan's diplomatic presence as evidence of continued willingness to reach an agreement. They were reading the diplomatic track. They were not reading the inward track, and on the morning of the attack, Japan made its most dangerous move while its ambassador was still delivering a diplomatic message in Washington. I am not saying Iran is about to attack an American base the way Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. I am saying the unconditioned warning has a specific signature in the historical record. A country that issues a military threat with no exit condition is not a country calibrating its pressure for a negotiated outcome. It is a country that has internally completed a calculation about whether the dangerous move is preferable to continued absorption of pressure. And when that calculation is complete, the public signals stop, including off switches, because the country no longer needs the other side to know how to stop the threat. The threat has become a description of what is coming, rather than a warning about what to avoid. Iran's inward signals today are specific. Iran halted its petrochemical export sector. $13 billion per year redirected inward rather than sold abroad. Iran's food and medical supply chains have been secured against continued blockade. Iran's underground military infrastructure was being cleared and reinforced during the ceasefire window, confirmed by satellite images from major news networks. Iran is not turning inward the way a country waiting to negotiate turns inward. It is turning inward the way a country preparing for extended self-sufficiency turns inward. That is the direction a previous detailed transcript described precisely, and the direction has not changed since that content was produced. The diplomatic track has the foreign minister visiting mediators. The inward track has petrochemicals redirected. tunnels cleared, and an IRGC command issuing warnings with no conditions attached. China is reading both tracks. Washington is reading one. China has studied this pattern for generations. China built 1.2 billion barrels of strategic crude reserve from sanctioned Iranian and Russian oil precisely so that when the pattern's most dangerous outcome arrived, China would not be the country scrambling for supply. That reserve was not built in reaction to this war. It was built in anticipation of exactly this moment when Iran's signals shift from conditioned warnings to unconditioned ones. And the distinction matters now. What America is reading and why the reading matters. Washington is reading Iran's unified hardline messaging as domestic political management. The president and the parliament speaker posting the same statement means Iran's government is managing the IRGC's internal pressure by publicly demonstrating unity. The military command's warning is the IRGC asserting its institutional position. Parliament's Hormuz declaration is the hardline faction performing for its domestic audience. The diplomatic track continues through Pakistan. The back channels are still running. The unified statements are the noise. The back channels are the signal. Washington's reading has internal logic. Iran's diplomatic faction has continued to engage. The foreign minister told Pakistan's mediators he intends to engage until a result is achieved. Iran sent a revised offer within 10 minutes of the cancellation of a key diplomatic trip, a revision called much better by the American side. The diplomatic motion is real. The 80% progress from Islamabad round 1 is real. A country committed to the Japan path does not send revised offers in 10 minutes. It does not send its foreign minister to Islamabad twice in a week. The diplomatic faction is still functioning. But here is what Washington's reading cannot account for. The previous lead negotiator is gone. The man who led Iran's delegation through 21 hours of Islamabad talks, who came within inches of a memorandum of understanding by his own account, has been replaced by a hardliner who ran for president on a platform of refusing nuclear concessions. This new lead rejected the 2015 nuclear deal from the opposition. His appointment as the new negotiating lead is not a diplomatic shuffle. It is the IRGC telling the diplomatic faction which direction the negotiation is authorized to go. The foreign minister can engage. The foreign minister can be present. The foreign minister cannot say yes to anything that requires nuclear concessions, because the new lead is now the authority that sets the boundary of yes. Washington is reading Iran's continued diplomatic presence as evidence the diplomatic faction is still in control. The diplomatic faction is still present. The question is what it is authorized to deliver, and the appointment of this new lead combined with the unconditioned military warning, combined with the leadership's permanent Hormuz order, combined with the forced unity statement erasing the moderate category tells you what the diplomatic faction is not authorized to deliver. Nuclear concessions, which is the stated primary war aim. Let me steelman the position that the unconditioned warning changes nothing strategically because the counter-argument is serious. The optimistic reading is that Iran's hardline messaging is the standard posture a country under maximum pressure must maintain for domestic consumption. No Iranian leader can be seen publicly softening their position while American ships are turning back Iranian tankers and while the American president is calling Iran choking like a stuffed pig. The IRGC's unconditioned warning is the IRGC doing what the IRGC always does, projecting strength for the domestic audience that is watching Iran get blockaded and wondering why the leadership is not responding. The warning is a performance for the Iranian street, not a strategic signal to Washington. The steelman also argues that the forced unity statement is the opposite of strength. When two politicians post the same message on the same day, it is because someone told them to post it, which means someone calculated that the appearance of unity had to be manufactured. Genuine unity does not require coordinated identical posts. The forced unity statement is evidence of internal fracture, not the elimination of it. The hardliners forced the statement because they needed it, which means the diplomatic faction is still there, still pressuring, still capable of delivering something if the conditions are right. On the new lead's appointment, the steelman argues that he negotiates too. He met with European powers before the 2015 deal, even as he publicly opposed it. His appointment may be the IRGC signaling what the minimum acceptable terms are, not the end of negotiation but the definition of the floor. Having him in the room tells America where the nuclear floor actually is, which is more useful than having the foreign minister in the room without clarity on how far the IRGC will let him go. All of that is coherent. The unconditioned warning may be domestic performance. The unity statement may reveal fracture rather than conceal it, The new lead may be the floor signal rather than the end of negotiation. But here is what the steelmen cannot account for. The combination, not any single signal. The combination of all four in the same week. Every one of the steelman's explanations works for an individual signal in isolation. But when four signals arrive simultaneously, the military warning with no condition, the permanent Hormuz order from the leadership, the battle until final victory declaration, and the forced eraser of the moderate category, the explanation that each one is individually manageable, domestic performance cannot explain why all four arrive together. The timing of a combined signal is itself a signal. Four separate domestic performances do not coordinate to arrive simultaneously by accident. Someone in Iran decided to send all four at once. That decision, the decision about timing, is the signal the steelman cannot explain away. Watch three things as the unconditioned warning runs. The first is whether Iran's military command issues any statement in the next 72 hours that includes a condition. The absence of the condition in the current IRGC statement is the signal. If the next IRGC statement returns to condition language, we will respond if the blockade is not lifted within a specific time frame. We will act if negotiations do not produce a framework by a named date. Then the diplomatic faction has reasserted enough internal authority to put the condition back. The condition is the off switch. Its presence means the diplomatic faction is still in control of the military's public messaging. Its continued absence means the IRGC has decided the condition is no longer part of the signal it is sending. Watch the next IRGC statement specifically for any named condition. A conditioned warning says there is still a diplomatic path. An unconditioned warning says the path is closing. The second is whether the foreign minister's revised offer, the one Iran sent within 10 minutes of the cancelled diplomatic trip, included any nuclear language. The American side called it much better without detailing what changed. If what changed was any nuclear dimension, a formulation on enrichment timeline, a reference to third-party custody, any language about Iran's 440 kilograms of enriched uranium, then Iran moved on nuclear in the private channel at the exact moment its public channel was issuing unconditioned military warnings. That combination, public hardening with private nuclear flexibility, is the diplomatic faction and the IRGC both operating simultaneously on different tracks. Watch what the much better offer actually contained. That content, if it surfaces, tells you whether Iran's two governments are still running different strategies, or whether the IRGC has unified them into the battle until final victory track. The third is what China says or does not say in the next week about Iran's military messaging. China has been present in every dimension of this conflict's economic architecture. The Dark Fleet, the yuan payments, the 26 calls from its foreign minister, the Security Council veto. China has said nothing about Iran's unconditioned military warning, nothing about the permanent Hormuz order, nothing about the forced unity statement. That silence is China's most precise possible signal. A country that is genuinely alarmed by its partner's military messaging says something, calls for restraint, reminds both sides of the diplomatic stakes, registers concern. A country that has already calculated which path its partner is on says nothing, because saying something might change the path. And the path China has already calculated is the one China built 1.2 billion barrels of strategic reserve to navigate. Watch whether China breaks its silence about Iran's military messaging in the next week. If China speaks, the path has surprised China. If China stays silent, China already knew. Push back on this if you see it differently. Read the IRGC statement. The exact language about hands on the trigger and no named condition. Read Parliament's permanent Hormuz declaration, the specific phrase order from the leadership, and what that phrase means in Iran's political structure. Read the forced unity statement, both the president and the parliament speaker posting identical language on the same day, and ask what that coordination required internally. Read the new lead negotiator's history, his public opposition to the 2015 nuclear deal, his presidential campaigns on the platform of refusing concessions, and then ask what his appointment as negotiating authority means for the foreign minister's room to maneuver. And then ask the question the coverage is not asking. Iran warned the fire can start any time. Iran named no condition that stops it. China has said nothing. Which of those three facts tells you the most about what China has already calculated about where this war is going next? China already has an answer to that question, and the answer is not a ceasefire,